Story 1. I lived with 5 men, and I was the only one whose parents were not millionaires. They never cleaned. About once a month I would deep clean the house, but 2 days later there would be garbage and food on the floor. I found out they had all told their parents that the poor kid made all the messes when one of their mothers came by and yelled at me. Story 2. This is not scathing like most of the ones on here. I grew up attending a private school in a developing country, so many of my classmates were in the top 1% of the country. Whenever we went swimming in the school pool, one friend in particular would always remark that swimming is more fun if the pool has a current or waves. I had no idea what he was talking about and generally thought he was just being imaginative. One day he invited me over to his house to swim. He had a 50-foot indoor pool that generated a current or waves. He was not lying. They are a lot more fun. Story 3. My college roommate's mother gave him $1,400 for the weekend, seemingly at random. He blew through the money by Saturday, then asked his mother for more and screamed at her because she had promised it for the weekend, even though he spent most of it on Friday, which is not part of the weekend. Story 4. I knew a trust fund girl whose father gave her the money to start a company. She lost it after she went on vacation for 6 months and forgot she was supposed to pay her employees. She assumed they would not get paid for 6 months and would still be there when she returned. I quizzed her for a few minutes, and it was clear she had no idea what a job was. Story 5. A good friend of mine said, "My dad bought me a house and now I cannot buy a house of my own. Stamp duties here are insane to prevent rich people from driving up property prices. I respect my friend for his desire to step out of his dad's shadow." Story 6. I have a different story. I met a friend in Economics 101 on my first day. He was a humble, well-mannered student and an all-around good person, so we got along and joined the same study group. It turned out his father owned a supermarket chain in Hong Kong, and his mother was a managing director at a hedge fund in mainland China. They were extremely wealthy, but he never let it show. His parents put him in boarding school as a child, but he said it was actually tough because the school did not tolerate privilege. Classes were about one teacher for every 3 students and very intense. They eventually sent him overseas for high school to a very upscale school in North Carolina for 4 years. He earned straight A grades throughout college and made me pay attention since I was prone to slacking. I did an internship in my junior year at his mother's fund, and she later wrote me a letter of recommendation that helped me get a job. We still keep in touch occasionally. He is working for a bank in Hong Kong now, following his mother's footsteps. He still comes to New York every year, and we usually have dinner with our significant others. It is strange because I see students at school driving Audis and BMWs, yet he was there to study like everyone else, even though his parents were probably the wealthiest people I saw at the school. Story 7. Look up the Corona del Mar high school cheating scandal. It happened at my school. Parents paid around $50,000 each to have a tutor hack the school computers and change students' grades. They hired lawyers when it came out. The students were not punished and all were admitted to their top 3 schools. This made the news, and the parents insisted their children were innocent and had just had a bad tutor. I knew a girl who had a total of 4 brand new cars. For example, a Range Rover and an Escalade. I was in a class with her when the teacher handed out forms that required a parent's signature. She signed them herself, tried to turn them in that same period, and became upset when the teacher would not accept them. There were students who talked trash and picked fights and then threatened, "If you touch me, my dad will sue." There are many more examples. Story 8. A girl I went to high school with received a Mercedes for her 16th birthday. She complained that she did not get a Lexus because her name was Lexi, and she thought it would be so cool for Lexi to drive a Lexus with a custom license plate that said Lexi. Her parents caved and bought her a Lexus for her 17th birthday. My college roommate threw a massive tantrum, screaming and crying on the floor, because her parents bought her a used, very large truck for graduation. It was a 2013 model with fewer than 10,000 miles and every available upgrade and add-on. We graduated in 2014, so the truck was maybe a year old. She already had a 2009 Range Rover. Story 9. A friend I met at university flew from Auckland to London for a week to go shopping. Clothes were cheaper in London, so to him it made sense. His parents were from Singapore and had no idea just how much cheaper cars were in New Zealand. So when he said he needed $70,000 for a Toyota Corolla, they gave him the money and he bought a used M3 from Bayerisch Motor in Werke. When he went home for the summer, he asked if I could look after the car for him. Given his father had pretty much cut him off at that point, he said I only had to pay for insurance and could treat it like my own. But as a 19-year-old sharing a flat and barely getting by, there was no way I could cover the cost of insurance, let alone petrol. Story 10. This happened a couple of weeks ago at the Infiniti dealership. I was in the waiting room with a very well-dressed woman waiting for our loaner cars. She left to check her loaner and came back crying. She said she drives a fully loaded QX80 and they gave her a QX60 with nothing in it. I said sorry that happened and asked how long she would have the loaner. She said a couple of hours. I wanted to tell her to suck it up, but instead I sat quietly, thinking how easy her life must be to cry over a loaner car. Story 11. A man from Saudi Arabia in the United Kingdom was in a crash that caused light damage to one side of his brand new Mercedes-Benz. He called one of his assistants to pick him up, even though the car was fully drivable. My friend arrived on the call with his tow truck and asked where the Mercedes-Benz should be towed. The man handed him the keys and said, "Keep it. I don't want it." Story 12. I used to have a friend who would constantly say she loved when her dad gave her money and that if she asked for a certain amount, her parents always gave her $50 extra. She then bought an apartment and boasted about it on Facebook, saying how proud she was that at 23 she could afford a home on her own. It still makes me want to face plant into a pile of jagged rocks. Story 13. A girl at my school was surprised by her parents in the school parking lot with a new Bavarian Motor Works car. Everyone outside was watching, and she started crying. At first we thought it was because she was so happy, but then she ran back into the school. They were supposed to arrive earlier, when more students could witness the surprise. I felt sorry for her father. He looked embarrassed and sad, as if he thought he had created a monster. Story 14. Dad bought his college-age daughter a house in a very nice neighborhood, so she and her friends could live rent-free while they attended university. He remodeled the entire house and in all probably spent close to $2 million. 2 weeks after moving in, they left a candle burning when they went to the store to get snacks for a football game. When they came home, the house was on fire. A month later, it was good as new and they were able to move back in. Story 15. Not exactly rich kid syndrome, but there was a family with 2 children who attended the elementary school attached to my middle school. Every day the parents left the house and drove separately to pick up their children. Each drove a Lamborghini, one black and one orange, parked back to back in the pickup line. At first I thought they were being showy, but then I realized the cars were 2-seaters, so that was the only way to do it. Story 16. My personal favorite was in college. A kid down the hall bought a brand new Fender Stratocaster, played it for a day, got bored and sold it to me case and all for $20. I still have it and play it 15 years later. It is a great guitar. Story 17. I had a scholarship to a private school for my secondary education, from 11 to 18. We were not poor, but compared with those paying full school fees, I felt like a peasant. The vast majority of the students were wealthy, and about half of them were spoiled brats. Most of the kids were given cars for their 17th birthday in anticipation of passing their driving tests. One boy in my year had a September birthday, so he was one of the first to take his test. He also had a huge house and garden, so he already knew how to drive because you can drive on private land at any age here. On the day he passed his test, he was dropped back at school in his shiny new sports car. I did not know what type it was. I did not care about cars, but everyone else seemed impressed. He picked up a couple of friends to go for a spin, and before he had gone 100 meters up the road, he completely wrecked the car. His father bought him a new one the next day, and he complained that it was the wrong color. Story 18. I had a student who lived across the hall from me my freshman year of college. He was from Honduras. During one of the icebreakers after move-in, he leaned toward me and asked if I knew when the maids would come to make his bed and clean. I guess his family was very well off in his home country, and the entire semester was an eye-opener for him in learning to take care of himself. Story 19. It was my first day as a librarian at a private school. I helped a 7-year-old with the printer. He offered to tip me. Story 20. There was a rich kid in our class who was disgusted that we bought used items such as computer parts on eBay. Once, when I said I had bought a memory module for my personal computer on eBay, he told me I should have some dignity and keep buying used items to myself. Story 21. This one is mild, but it shows how clueless wealthy kids can be, completely unaware of the disparity between them and people with average incomes. Anyway, he picked me up one day in a new $85,000 sports car, the newest Corvette Special Edition, fresh off the line. I said, "Wow, your car's incredible." He said he wished everyone knew he had worked a full month with his grandfather to earn it himself. Story 22. I was in a theology class discussing compromises. The teacher asked, "What are some compromises your parents have made?" A very wealthy girl replied, "My mom wanted to go to Hawaii and my dad wanted to go to Mexico, so we went to the Bahamas instead." Attending private school is full of stories like that. Earlier this week, I asked why the girl I sit next to was absent. Her friend said she was skipping class to attend a Bruno Mars and Pitbull concert in Hawaii. Last year, another girl was so stressed with school that she went to Lithuania with her dad for a month. I have no idea how she caught up on all her schoolwork. Story 23. I watched Rich Kids of Instagram on YouTube and am still recovering. Story 24. Some of the students tried to bribe bouncers and even police officers. This is less surprising when you realize they were international students from wealthy families where bribery is common or expected. Thankfully, they learned quickly not to do that. Story 25. I had two friends in college who were from the United Arab Emirates. They were brothers whose parents were sending them to school in the United States. They were pretty cool and down to earth, if a bit odd. They knew I did not have much money and could not afford the things they did, so they covered my expenses. They did crazy things like renting a private plane to go to a concert, hiring black cars with drivers, and paying for expensive dinners in exclusive clubs. On the strange side, they slaughtered a goat in the bathtub to prepare a traditional Arabian dinner, and they wore too much Dracker cologne. Story 26. My girlfriend's family is wealthy. She is working her way toward it. She was waiting for a promotion and said, "I cannot believe anyone would make someone work for almost a year." I laughed. Story 27. There are a lot of wealthy students in my business program at the university. I met a girl a few months ago at a social. We were chatting about the program and she proudly told me that she threatens to sue the school whenever things do not go her way. She added that they have to take the threat seriously because they know she actually has the means to follow through. Story 28. A coworker told me she hated her dad. When I asked why, she said he keeps asking her for money because she used his credit card for a trip to Europe and left him with an $80,000 bill last year. Story 29. My ex-girlfriend's friend asked me, "Can you believe there are people who have never been on a private jet?" Yes, I'm one of them. Story 30. A 14-year-old had a loud cursing meltdown, shouting, "Where the fuck is he?" The pilot of the private helicopter that had brought him there had gone to get a cup of coffee. The boy had finished skiing for the day and found it unacceptable to wait 10 minutes to be flown home. Story 31. When I was in college, a friend who was heavily involved in fraternity life told me about a first-year student who was expelled for having a servant flown in to perform the hazing chores the student should have done. Story 32. As a kid, I was very poor. We had no money and barely kept the lights on. My mother did an excellent job. She even worked 2 different jobs and went to night school at one point to create a better future for us. I grew up without many things, but it taught me what you really need in life. A roof over your head and food in your belly. Everything after that is a bonus. I had a lot of friends who were way better off than me, but one kid in particular had everything. He was a Jehovah's Witness, so he did not celebrate birthdays or Christmas, but his family would often give him things to make up for it. Sometimes he yelled at his mother for buying something he thought was crap or for getting the wrong model, despite receiving a lot of great stuff. He had all the games, consoles, and toys, but he would still complain. One of the last times I hung out with him, he was shouting at his mother because she had promised to buy him a new guitar he was learning to play, but it was late and the stores were closed, so it was literally impossible. He kept berating his mother and speaking to her as if she were a fool. It was painful to watch. I was about 14 at the time. I stopped hanging out with him after that. I later heard his mother had had enough and kicked him out of the house. He became a shoplifter and lived in the local Young Men's Christian Association for a while. I think he is back on track now, but as a kid he was often harsh to his parents. Story 33. I went to college with a guy who totaled 5 Ford Mustangs in 1 year. I do not think he was sober enough to remember any of them. Story 34. Funny short story. My ex-wife used to drive a 1998 Honda Accord. She treated it poorly, and one day I got into the car to drive somewhere and noticed it was falling apart. I had two options: send it to the junkyard or sell it. I put it on Craigslist for $250. I thought it could go to a low-income family with someone who had the know-how to partially restore it, but when I met the buyer, he was not who I expected. He pulled up in a brand new Cadillac Escalade and told me his son was spoiled. His son had crashed a Bayerische Motorenwerke, a Mercedes-Benz, and an Audi, and the father was done buying him expensive cars. It turned out the father purchased my car as a way of torturing his son. I even received the Silver Award on Reddit for selling the car, and later the Gold Award. After 3.5 years on Reddit and 47,000 karma, that was my first gold. Thank you. Story 35. I work in a jail. I always enjoy it when someone gets arrested and comes in screaming, "Do you know who my dad is?" He will buy your entire jail. It is even better when that relative refuses to post bail. Story 36. I came from a lower-class background and got into a top university in the United Kingdom, where I joined the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus club. I am a diving instructor and paid for all my training and equipment myself, but my kit had clearly been well used. It was still safe and functional, just faded and frayed around the edges. One of the senior members, probably in his mid-20s, pointed out how beaten one item of kit looked and asked why I had not replaced it. I was genuinely confused. It worked and was safe, so I saw no reason to replace it. He kept commenting on how it looked, and I told him bluntly that I did not have £500 to spend on something just because it no longer looked pretty. He then asked why I did not just ask my parents to buy me a new one. Of course not. In my 20s, after having worked part or full-time for 7 years, I was not going to ask my single parent, who relied on disability benefits, to buy me new equipment. He was completely baffled. Story 37. A girl asked me to go in and buy her 6 cartons of cigarettes because she did not want to get out of the car and risk breaking her nails. She said I could buy whatever I wanted. It was easily what I made in a week after taxes, gone in seconds. Edit. I switched packs to cartons. Story 38. I was sitting in a college group discussion when one student complained that his parents were so disadvantaged, they only brought home $500,000 a year 20 years ago. I remained silent because my family only had $30,000 a year. I was there only because of scholarships and financial aid. The worst thing was all the sympathy that student received from other students in the class. The school was so proud of its racial diversity, but 95% of the students came from families in the top 1% of income earners. Story 39. Teacher here. 2 stories spring to mind. 1. My first teaching job was at a private middle school in one of the wealthiest enclaves in the United States. I taught a student who told me he did not finish his homework because his helicopter had stalled over the weekend, and he could not leave his family's island. He was telling the truth. The same student was also a persistent troublemaker who wanted to misbehave with the cool kids, then would lie while crying when held accountable. His parents knew he was difficult and brought me a case of wine from their vineyard as a gift at every parent-teacher conference or before the holidays, but they did not care enough to discipline him. 2. I now teach at a private school in Europe, and I am absolutely gobsmacked by how many parents are happy to pay $35,000 per year to send their children to boarding school so the children do nothing as students and repeat grades 1, 2, or 3 times because they make no effort whatsoever. Story 40. I really want a classic Jaguar E-Type convertible, but annoyingly you can only buy used ones. Story 41. I knew a girl in high school who threw a tantrum because, by the way, the sport utility vehicle her parents had just bought was not the right color. Story 42. When I was in 6th grade, A kid bragged that his computer cost $10,000. Whenever I beat him in a game, he claimed he was experiencing frames per second lag. He bet money that he would win, then refused to pay, blaming what he called unfair lag. Story 43. A long time ago, I was dating a rich girl, not insanely rich, but rich enough. I am from Norway and we have a recycling system for plastic bottles. You get about 10 cents per bottle. Her family had a literal mountain of empty bottles and crates in their warehouse. I asked her father, what are you going to do with these? He replied that they were from staff parties a couple of years back and he just had not had time to get rid of them. I told him I would recycle them for a percentage. He said, keep it all. So I did. I made multiple trips to several stores, and it ended up being about $1,300, which was an insane amount of money for me at the time. I bought a guitar with the money. I realize now it is not a crazy story, but for me it felt incredible to earn that much money for 4 to 5 hours of work because her family could not be bothered to do it. Some people asked what guitar I bought. It was a Squier Jagmaster. I spent the rest on rent and weed. I was 20 or 21, so there you go. I was a catch. Story 44. Once, my next-door college dorm mate was worried that his father had not yet given him money for the month, and $1,000 was not going to last him through the week. Meanwhile, I was donating plasma to afford my next meal. Life is just like that. Story 45. Twins in high school. On their 17th birthday, they got matching pickup trucks. Souped up, larger than life, extremely cool black ones. Twin A was the brat and smashed his truck in a remarkable time frame. I want to say the same day. The parents decided not to get him another one. Insurance probably covered it, even if it was his fault. Regardless, he was going to learn a lesson. The lesson? He took Twin B's truck. Twin B was the responsible one, and crashed it on purpose. If he could not have one, neither could his brother. So much recklessness, spite, and downright illegal behavior in what he did. Follow up? I am not sure if he went to prison or anything like that. He was not at school the next year. He could have dropped out. He was pretty sketchy. Twin B was actually a really good guy, but as soon as his brother was gone, he became very quiet. He eventually got some sort of car, but it was much more toned down and I cannot remember what it looked like. There were not many other wealthy kids at the school, so this whole story stood out as a huge event when it happened. Story 46. I would not call him a friend. He is more of an acquaintance. He is not wealthy anymore, but he grew up with very wealthy parents and was spoiled. He used drugs and drank all the time until about 25, then got kicked out. Nowadays he lives on my friend's couch. He is a nice enough guy, but he tends to get very drunk and, when intoxicated, becomes aggressive and rude. He breaks things, usually by accident and sometimes deliberately, and sometimes starts physical fights. I do not know how my friend deals with it. He is slowly learning the value of money. Previously, he would wreck a car his parents bought him and shrug it off because they would buy a new one the next week. Nowadays, he is at least a bit more financially aware, even if he spends most of his money on alcohol. I do not know how I forgot to mention this, but he has been arrested about 4 times, mostly for being drunk in public. One occasion was around 3 in the morning, when he was banging on the windows of a closed Taco Bell. He somehow triggered the alarm and the police were called. He appears intoxicated in his mugshot, smiling as if he had just won $1 million. He is an enigma. Consequences seem to have little effect on him. It does make for some funny stories, I suppose. Story 47. My parents bought me a laptop for my 18th birthday. It was unheard of in my family to receive gifts that were so expensive or technological. I cried when my mother handed it to me. I was about to move away for university, and both my mother and father had saved 6 months' wages between them to afford it for me. We all hugged and cried. It was extremely meaningful and emotional. I went off to university. One night in the dorms, my dorm mate, a rich white boy from Long Island, brought back 2 drunk girls and another friend. They started drinking and rolling weed in the dorm, which I was fine with. I went to the bathroom down the hall, and when I returned, one of the drunk girls had opened my laptop and was trying to log in. I approached her and said that it was my laptop, not my roommate's. I did not mind her using it, but offered to log her into the guest account. As she moved the laptop toward me, she knocked an open bottle of wine onto it, flooding the entire laptop. She apologized, and I told her to get a towel and put it upside down. I was freaking out. I could not believe it was happening. My roommate told me to calm down and asked if I could just get a new one. I started patting down the laptop and asked them to help replace it if it did not work because I needed it for my classes. They laughed and asked why my parents could not buy me a new one. It took 2 weeks of demanding before they reluctantly agreed to replace it. After I explained to the dorm manager that my family was extremely poor and that it was unbelievable they had managed to send me to university at all, let alone buy a new laptop. Luckily, he was sympathetic and helped arrange a replacement. But the comment, "Cannot you just get a new one?" broke my heart more than the damage to the laptop. I looked at him and felt furious. I had never experienced rich kid entitlement so clearly before or since. Story 48. When I worked at a gas station in my early 20s, it was the hangout spot for spoiled teens to show off their new cars, try to steal beer, but generally just hang out in a gas station parking lot. What the hell? Anyway, one Dukanazl turned 16 and his parents bought him a brand new sports car. By the next weekend, he had totaled it while trying to show off and do donuts in the intersection where the gas station was located, and he slammed into a pole. He was fine, but the car was demolished. Where's karma when you need it? Within 2 weeks, this asshat already had another brand new car. He would brag about how his parents were so stupid and that he was already looking to upgrade when the next model came out. He showed no regard for the money his parents shelled out and no regard for the lives he put in jeopardy with his reckless driving. I wanted to throttle him. Story 49. My friend is a commercial pilot and works for a large company that has a flight department consisting of several jets and turboprop airplanes. The owner's children and a group of their friends were granted permission to fly one of the jets from the central United States to the Bahamas. Upon arriving in the Bahamas, they were meeting other friends and boarding a very large yacht for a week. They realized the yacht's galley was equipped with fine dining, not the kind of food they preferred. They wanted junk food, so they ordered the pilots to fly back through United States Customs to their hometown in the Midwest. Once there, they picked up multiple sides of barbecue ribs, burgers, hot dogs, soda, beer, and piles of other junk food and flew back to the Bahamas, all within a time frame that still allowed them to leave with the yacht on time. It costs roughly $5,000 an hour to operate the jet they were using, and the owners did not consider this extreme. Due to the popularity of this post, I called and got clarification on several points that were repeatedly questioned. The barbecue was the main purpose for the return trip to the Midwest. If you are from the Midwest or a southern barbecue city, you know what I mean. They do not have this in Florida. The other junk food was additional requests from other guests. The plane owner's son had promised, in the months prior, to bring some of the barbecue he had told his friends about repeatedly throughout college. He forgot and was being criticized for it. In an act of boldness, he sent the plane back for it. This is the most extreme example of how these planes are used and how wealth is flaunted within this company. That is with the understanding that wife shopping trips, sending a plane back to pick up a child after school to come to Florida, ball games, hunting and fishing trips, and dining in a restaurant 3,000 miles away are commonplace. On occasion, these planes and pilots have been used as angel flights to transport ill children and family members throughout the country for medical procedures. The pilots for this company are not paid the best but are permitted to bring family, mostly spouses, to destinations as space and work schedule allow. Some senior pilots can stay at company-owned property nationwide if available. Story 50. A friend of mine is paying her abusive, unfaithful, and heinous boyfriend's school fees from her parents' bank account without their knowledge. It costs £40,000 per year. Story 51. I knew a kid named Thor growing up. He treated everyone like trash. He lived in a giant, obnoxious postmodern house in an otherwise normal neighborhood. It had a gravel lawn decorated with random spheres of different colors. The house itself was an aluminum-clad cube with curved yellow rooms jutting out. One year for his birthday, Thor received a 25-foot glass birdwatching bridge attached to the top floor. I do not think they had that much money. I suspect they just wanted to feel like the big fish in a small pond. Story 52. My wealthy cousin asserts that poor people are poor because they are fat and lazy. If they took better care of their appearance, they could also be wealthy in a society that values first impressions and appearances. Story 53. One of my coworkers, who was not really a friend, made a comment years ago that has stuck with me as the most out-of-touch thing I have ever heard anyone say in person. I mean, who trusts Portuguese cleaning people? There are layers of entitlement and snobbery in that remark, but he was complaining about relatable "my parents hate me and blame me for everything" issues. His parents really did blame him for whatever the cleaning team broke. I'm still not sure how to feel about it. He had real hardships I can understand, expressed from a frame of reference I cannot. Story 54. I was that poor kid who got a scholarship to a ridiculous private school. The thing that stood out for me was how much people cared about what other people's parents did. Your parents' achievements counted for you. My daddy just bought a new plane. Yes, a literal statement. So what does your dad do? When I replied, fuck all, they laughed and thought I was being cool about it. Story 55. I was a humble rich kid at a club in my college town. My roommate's new friend, who drove a Ford Raptor, was at the bar. I started shooting the breeze with him and we were getting along, so I offered to buy a Y-bomb, a vodka and Red Bull shot. Because he was wealthy, he said I did not have to do that, and to save my money, the round would be on him. I told him it did not matter, I was having a good time, and I insisted on buying the shot. Immediately after, he pulled out a Black American Express card and purchased the nicest very important person booth in the club for around $3,000. He then asked about the drink packages and whether he could buy 2 bottles on top of the maximum package. He looked at me and said tit for tat. Safe to say, I do not recall much after that. Story 56. I am not rich. Look at my neighbor's house. It is twice the size of mine. You might have a sprained ankle and I a broken leg, but that does not mean you are not injured. For the record, his neighbor's house was the same size. It just had a front deck. Story 57. On graduation day, the father of the student shows him his brand new Bayerische Motorenwerke car parked out front. The student then pulls up next to his friend at the traffic light near the school. When the light turns green, he accelerates, fishtails, and immediately strikes a parked car. The car lasted only 10 minutes. Story 58. I attended a private school at a significant discount because my father had taught there for nearly 20 years. Oh, the stories I could tell. One student flew to Florida for a dental appointment. One student bought a Jeep with a credit card. At one point, the campus even had an automated teller machine. Someone found a receipt for a withdrawal from a checking account that still had $900,000 in it. On a field trip, we stayed at a hotel for a few nights. My roommate could not understand why I refused to switch to a different hotel that would cost $100 per night each when I only had $100 to last the entire week. Story 59. A family on my brother's high school baseball team referred to their brand new Subaru as a poor person's car. Story 60. All right, story time. I used to work for a restaurant that celebrated Free Pancake Day. On Free Pancake Day, I had a most interesting encounter. A college kid came in and took an entire 4-person table all to himself. He set up a MacBook, put on headphones connected to his iPhone, and would not take them off to order or look at me. He just wanted the free pancakes and water. He stayed for over 2 hours during our busiest day. Finally, we were getting ready to end the event and were collecting donations for the local children's hospital. I stopped by his table and let him know. He put up one finger, made a big show of shutting his laptop, paused his music, and finally took his headphones off. He turned to me and said, "I do not think people should get free stuff." Then he set everything back up and made a shooing gesture at me. I thank God every day that I do not wake up being that asshole. Story 61. The kid's father owned all the Little Caesars in town. Getting free pizza whenever we wanted was nice. Fast forward to prom dinner. I did not have a date, but I liked Red Lobster, so I tagged along before going home to play World of Warcraft. There were several of us. Some shared entrees because they were quite large. The kid wanted mozzarella sticks. He ordered a chicken burger with mozzarella sticks instead of fries. The dinner went normally, and when the plates were being cleared, there was not a bite taken from his burger. The server asked if I wanted the burger packed up. He said no, just throw it out. I took the burger, and the server received a 300% tip because his father handed him a $50 bill and the kid had no concept of money. Context: roughly 2007 to 2008 for cost context. Story 62. At the end of the school year, we had to clean out our dorm rooms. One student had parents who flew a servant from China to the United States to clean his room. It still blows my mind to this day. Story 63. A college student chimed in during a conversation among my friends about how taxing it was to work multiple nights a week. He said he was frustrated with his parents because they were only willing to help him financially up to a point. They paid for his education, rent, car, and food, but he could not believe they would not also pay for his reading week vacation. Story 64. When I was 12, the rich kid's mother lived in the same homeowners association as my dad. His father was new money rich, drove a Ferrari, and had a new trophy wife. The kid was entitled about everything and would throw a conniption if someone else got something he wanted. His go-to line was, "My dad is rich." His father was obnoxious, but his mother was very sweet. Tragically, the rich kid ended up murdering a man with a baseball bat, striking him in the head from behind. He is now serving a life sentence. Story 65. I had to drive a girl home in her 2009 Tahoe. She asked me to crash it because it did not have a touchscreen, and she said it was not fair that her sister had a new one. Story 66. My roommate in his first year of college bought a brand new 4K television with his stepfather's credit card without permission, and the stepfather was fine when he found out. Story 67. These stories raised my blood pressure. To give your eyes a break, I will share one story about a good rich kid, which may not be welcome. Generally, rich kids do not mind spending their parents' money. When I first met him, I assumed he was poor like me or at most average. He wore the same shirt and pants most days, did not drive an expensive car, a Honda Fit, and kept a low-key appearance. Eventually, we started dating and went to pizza places and Chinese restaurants, very cheap and low-key. There was no sign that he was wealthy. He is an international student, and one day after we had been dating for a while, he mentioned that he is not allowed to work in this country. He hinted at something and asked if I knew how he was paying for school. Since I had not been close to an international student before, I assumed savings, working through it, or loans. Then I thought about it more. He has an apartment by himself, goes to an expensive school full-time, and bought a brand new car when he came here a couple of years earlier. How was he affording all of this? He eventually said that his father pays for everything. I said okay and did not press it because I did not believe him. We never talked about it again. A couple of months later, he said he needed help with something on his bank statement and asked me to help. When I saw the numbers, I almost fell over. I asked where he got all that money, and he said from his father. He later mentioned that his father is among the top 200 richest people in his country of about 51 million people. To say I was shocked is an understatement, but looking at him you would never know. Some days he slightly resembles a homeless person because he does not always shower. He never buys anything he does not need. He pays for food, gas, rent, and electricity, and that is it. I have to push him to buy new clothes when he needs them and tell him sometimes spending money is necessary for fun. He only shops at outlet stores and will not pay more than $15. For jeans, any shirt over $10 is not one he wants. He let his hair grow halfway down his back because he did not want to spend $30 to have it cut. He was growing it to donate but did not realize he would have to pay someone to cut it. So I bought supplies and cut it at home. I find it a little crazy that he is technically extremely wealthy but does not buy anything. His father would let him and has said so, but he chooses not to. To put things in perspective, I have $2 and will spend every penny on whatever makes me happy at the time, while his father casually sent him $100,000 the other day for basic life expenses for the year, and he does not spend an unnecessary penny. He is admirable. He is the most down-to-earth person I have ever met and also the most affluent person I will likely ever meet. I sometimes think he is a little too frugal, but we keep our accounts separate so it does not bother me. He views the money he uses as his father's money, not money he has earned the right to use. I hope if I ever have children I can teach them to be this responsible and respectful. Postscript. If he had acted anything like the other stories in this thread, we would not have made it past our first date. Story 68. My 18-year-old spoiled friend was given a brand new Lexus. After about 8 months, when the brake pads needed replacing, he called it a piece of shit and said it was broken. So his parents bought him a Bayerisch Motorenwerke M3 instead. Story 69. When I was at summer camp, one morning a rich kid complained that the mattresses were terrible and said he was going to have to call his chiropractor when he got home. The looks he got made him realize that most 12-year-olds do not have a chiropractor on call. Story 70. A guy in high school never wanted anyone to visit his house. He always wore nice clothes and had an okay first car, but nobody really knew why he had this aversion to house guests. Oh well, our little clique hung out all through high school, and the day after graduation he invited us to his house for a graduation party. Motherfucker. His lakefront house in the mountains had a Jaguar and a Ferrari parked out front. He had a racquetball court in the basement that we were not allowed to enter, but that was okay because we had free reign of his vintage arcade room, the stand-up feed-a-quarter machines. He had never told us in 4 years that he was extremely rich. I've never met anyone so humble. Story 71. My friend knew him, we were all straight. He was about 27 and I was about 20. As a conversation starter, he asked, "What does your father do?" It was completely out of left field. His father owned a construction company and, in that city, they were very wealthy. He defined himself as his father's son and assumed I did too. Story 72. I go to a school in the Middle East, so rich people. One of my friends was chewing gum while holding a bowl from the cafeteria. Instead of throwing her gum away like a normal person, she stuck it to the bottom of the bowl because someone else would eventually clean it up. Story 73. A child of a Saudi prince or dignitary attended Queen's University and owned a handgun. He used to drive around in a large white Bayerisch Motorenwerke vehicle, keeping the handgun in the glove box and taking it out to show people. Belfast is a bad place to be waving a gun around. Story 74. There was a girl in my class who kept dropping her phone for attention. She kept saying that she would get a new phone anyway, but it was the latest Samsung. At one point we told her to throw it harder, and multiple people shouted to smash it harder. Then the screen broke. Story 75. I was about 7 or 8, spending the night at my cousin's house. They were much better off than we were. Then I was invited to a neighbor's house, whose family was even better off. It was an amazing place. We played for hours. Picture this, we were playing with Lego bricks like any 8-year-old would, and he needed a simple little 1x1 piece. He found a 1x1 piece with a little loop attached. Then he took wire cutters, cut the loop off, and he had a plain 1x1 piece. I was mortified. I still am, 30 years later. Destroying a special piece always struck me as the ultimate I do not give a fuck rich kid move I have ever seen. Story 76. I knew a student a year ahead of me who owned 3 different luxury cars in high school. After crashing and totaling one and having another seized by the police because he was caught with drugs in it, he still got a third. He barely graduated from a mediocre college and then obtained a 6-figure job at his father's company. He and his brother later sued each other over their father's baseball memorabilia collection, valued at 6 figures, after his death. Story 77. I was an intern at my former place of employment a long time ago. He complained that he did not like the movie Cruel Intentions because it made him and his friends look so bad. I rolled my eyes so hard that I got a migraine. Story 78. When I was enlisted, I worked with a guy who was heir to an orange juice empire. He was the chillest person I knew and not the problem. He was awesome. When we were overseas, he noticed the base exchange, the post exchange, and the bank had slightly different rates for the local currency, and he worked some foreign exchange magic between the 3 to get a little extra spending money. The next guy I worked with was the worst. Completely clueless. He complained that he couldn't get a satellite signal on his houseboat, so he had to watch digital video discs on vacation. This was around the September 11th attacks, so these things weren't cheap. Then we found out his mother was coming on base to clean his room. We found out because his roommate was black and his mother was very racist. She called the police. That was a difficult conversation. I'll add that the kid wasn't all bad. His plan for his enlistment bonus was to put it in a certificate of deposit and then use the certificate of deposit as collateral for a car loan. That way, at the end, he would still have his money and a car. I thought that was all right. And then he did this. You were the chosen one, and then he wasn't. Story 79. We had a Chinese foreign exchange student living with us. My wife at that time was working 2 part-time personal support worker jobs, while I worked a full-time information technology job that was not quite cutting it. We had some debts, but we were mostly getting by. He asked her why she was working 2 jobs. Because we have bills to pay. Why do you not get your parents to pay for it? Because this is how the real world works. Story 80. My friend's mother owns a very large oil company. She takes a salary of $3 million each year, and the company makes at least 10 times that amount. He still says he is middle class, so please stop commenting that it makes no sense. Story 81. Not as crazy as the others. I went to an average high school, and my first car was an old piece of junk, like most kids' first cars. I remember going to a track meet at the wealthy private school in town and watching one of the kids I raced against drive away afterward in his brand new Porsche. That always boggled my mind. Story 82. In college, there was a girl in our friend group who came from a wealthy family. When we discussed summer plans, some people were organizing a trip, and she overheard someone say they wished they could go but could not afford it. She said she did not understand and asked why they did not just have their parents pay for it. She had always had her parents pay for everything and genuinely assumed it was the same for everyone. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.